In a major development, Hamas has responded positively to the ceasefire proposal in Gaza. Elsewhere, more than 100 BBC staff have revolted against the UK public broadcaster funded by our hard-earned tax money, called the License Fee, accusing their employer of peddling the Israeli agenda in the guise of journalism. More than 300 stars and media figures, including Miriam Margolyes, Alexei Sale, Juliet Stevenson, and Mike Lee, later signed the same letter addressed to the BBC management calling for the removal of a board member called Robbie Gibb over claims of conflict of interest regarding the Middle East. An English footballing hero, Gary Lineker, has said that the BBC should hang its head in shame for its brazen biases against the victims of Gaza. Now let's look at these developments in detail. Hamas has just sent a positive message to the ceasefire proposal, which entails releasing of 10 alive and 18 dead Israeli captives in the first 60 days of the ceasefire. This period would be used to discuss a permanent ceasefire deal and the complete withdrawal of Israeli terrorists from the territory. If the ceasefire is indeed agreed upon, then there will be a surge in humanitarian aid, which would be distributed by established UN agencies and other bodies, such as the Palestinian Red Crescent, and not the bunch of genocidal maniacs from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I will bring more updates on the ceasefire when all parties agree to this formally.
Well, let's stay with that breaking news right now about Hamas, and we can go straight to our Middle East correspondent, Ione Wells, in Jerusalem. Ione, what more can you tell us about this Hamas response to mediators?
Well, in the last half an hour, we have had confirmation from Hamas in a statement saying that they have submitted a response to mediators. They say that their response is characterized by positivity and that they are ready to start negotiations immediately. Now, it is worth stressing that we don't know what their response is, and we don't know that this means they will necessarily accept the proposal. What we do know about the proposal, which has been discussed over the last couple of days since Donald Trump said that Israel had accepted the terms of it, is that it is thought to include a proposal to release in a staggered manner 10 living hostages from Gaza and also release the bodies of 18 hostages who are believed to be dead in exchange for some Palestinians in Israeli jails. It's also thought to include things like allowing more aid into Gaza and perhaps a staggered removal of some Israeli troops from Gaza. But what is not in it may prove to be more significant, because we know that one of the main sticking points throughout these negotiations has been that Hamas wants Israel to commit to ending the war after a ceasefire period. They want that commitment that the bombardment won't continue after a 60-day ceasefire. That is something which Israel has so far rejected to commit to. We don't yet know whether that is something they will be asking for as a result in the negotiations, which they say they're now ready to start.
This was the news from the BBC, which is facing an unprecedented revolt from its staff over the corporation's disgraceful role in support of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. More than 100 BBC employees have written to Director General Tim Davey to complain about the corporation becoming a mouthpiece of Israel. The letter criticized the BBC for its failure to reflect the reality of the situation in Gaza and urged that reporting falls short of editorial standards. The letter said, and I quote, "All too often it has felt that BBC has been performing PR for the Israeli government and military. This should be a cause of great shame and concern for everyone at the BBC." End quote. The BBC has faced countless accusations of brazen biases in favor of Israel, even in the face of unspeakable atrocities committed by the settler colony against unarmed and defenseless Palestinians. What appeared to have triggered the latest revolt within the BBC staff against their employer is how it has capitulated to government pressure over its coverage of the Glastonbury Music Festival, where English punk duo Bob Vylan was seen making Death to the IDF chant. The pro-Israeli Labour government reacted angrily and demanded stringent action against those responsible for that broadcast, and the BBC willingly obliged. BBC Director General Tim Davey, my former boss, issued an extraordinary statement to please the government. In a message to staff on Thursday, Davey wrote, and I quote, "I deeply regret that such offensive and deplorable behavior appeared on the BBC and want to say sorry to our audience and to all of you, but in particular to Jewish colleagues and the Jewish community." End quote. The IDF has carried out its genocidal campaign against 2 million Palestinians, and not once did Tim Davey issue such a statement, despite thousands of complaints against the BBC's questionable and shameful coverage. But here, one rock band artist made some utterances against the disgraced military of a settler colony far away from the UK, and Davey was willing to crawl. He also appeared to agree with the government that words uttered against the Israeli troops, a foreign entity currently engaged in a genocide, had the potential to offend the whole of the Jewish community. This is simply extraordinary, and not much is being commented on this aspect. Simply put, this is another attempt by the government to use its propaganda mouthpiece called the BBC to whitewash the Israeli war crimes and shield the IDF from future consequences. This is a brazen way to stop anyone from criticizing the IDF, regardless of the severity of its war crimes in Gaza. And the BBC doesn't have any problem in being a willful participant in this dirty propaganda. No wonder the English footballing legend Gary Lineker has asked the BBC to hang its head in shame. This was in the context of the BBC refusing to broadcast a documentary that it commissioned on how Israel has systematically destroyed every single hospital in Gaza. And the reason for its refusal to run the documentary after having first commissioned it? Because the BBC didn't want to be biased against Israeli terrorists who committed these grotesque and despicable crimes. Now you understand why I call this organization Rogue Now. A spectacular fall from grace in the last 20 to 21 months has been mind-boggling. Anyway, Channel 4 and Mehdi Hassan's media startup Zitio bought the right to run the documentary that the BBC has refused to broadcast. And the reaction was of utter horror and shock from the average news-consuming public, both in the UK and abroad. The makers of the documentary also held a special screening for Gary Lineker, who was truly horrified after watching the film.
One of the most important films I've ever seen, certainly most moving. Might need a minute here. It needed to be seen. It really did need to be seen. I think everyone will agree with that. I think the BBC should hold its head in shame. I really do. It's someone that's worked for the corporation for 30 years. To see the way it's declined in the last year or two has been devastating, really. So I've defended it against claims that it's partial. It talks about impartiality all the time, and the truth is, at the moment, at the very top of the BBC, not the BBC all, because there are thousands and thousands of people, as you know, that work at the BBC that are good people that understand what is going on here and can see it. We're seeing it on our phones every day. And the problem is they're bowing to the pressure from the top. And this is a worry. And I think time's coming where a lot of people are going to be answerable to this. And complicity is something that will come to many.
I do not know why the BBC has behaved in a way that it did all through the ongoing Gaza conflict. But one thing is clear. The damage caused to the reputation of this organization is permanent. Make no mistake about it. I do not think the BBC would ever be able to command the respect that it once did. We will look at this period with deep pain and sorrow when historians write about the downfall of an iconic organization. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this news platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.